What we're doing is we're collecting information about existing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure throughout Kern County and its towns and cities. Based on the information of the collected data, we'll try to identify the deficiencies in the infrastructure, the sidewalks and bikeways, and try to develop a system where we can prioritize to fix the worst problems first and then just go down the list, as far as we can. Grant funding is becoming extremely competitive, and it's also data driven. So this report was a lot of statistics. How many people have been hurt? How many feet of sidewalk do we actually need? How many bike lanes? What type of people will be using it? So using the money that we got from the active transportation program to fund the plan, we also got money from the Golden Empire Transit District out of Bakersfield, Kern Regional Transit, which I saw the stop is right in front of here, and also some additional money from the city of Bakersfield. We've had a series of walk audits, and these are community open houses. We'll have 17 throughout the county. This is the 8th group that we've had so far. There's a schedule of more events tomorrow in Lake Isabella and Tehachapi. We've hired a prime contractor of Alta Planning and Design, and I'll turn it over to Rory Renfro, who's the lead designer with Alta. So, go Al.
All right, well, I'll keep my remarks pretty quick as we're going to have Paul Zykoski from Local Government Commission. But my name is Rory Renfro, and with Alta Planning and Design, and we're a firm that specializes in active transportation planning, design, and implementation work. This project is based out of our Los Angeles office, and we've been doing a lot of work in the region on walking and bicycling and transit access projects over the years, and so we're really excited to build on that momentum, but also to build on the great efforts that many of the communities here in Kern County have already undertaken to improve walking and bicycling. And so again, we're just out here tonight as part of our efforts to get out into the community to augment a lot of this data-driven stuff, if you will, that we have on the maps and posters. But you folks are the experts that use this system on a daily basis, so we're really excited to get your thoughts and input on how things are working in your particular community. Paul Zykoski, he's from Local Government Commission. They're one of our 2 partners on this project. He's going to give a little brief overview presentation just on kind of walking, bicycling 101. And after that, we'll have a chance to, or you'll all have a chance to take another look at the materials here, ask any of us questions or give us your thoughts and comments. And if you don't feel comfortable in that environment, we have questionnaires, a survey in the back, and there's also our project website, kernatp.org. So lots of ways to get involved. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thanks, Rory. So again, I'm with the Local Government Commission. We're a nonprofit based in Sacramento that has members in local government. We work throughout California. We've done a lot of work on active transportation, including some projects in Kern County. I guess most recently we worked in Lamont and Weed Patch a few years ago, doing a plan for them to improve conditions for walking and bicycling there. We worked in Arvin. I've also worked on several park plans around the county. And I've also done some workshops through the COG over the years. So if we can get the lights down, I'll get into this. Just so, this is an overview on basically on what some cities are doing. Whoops,
that's a little too dark.
A little too dark, yeah. What cities are doing to really create environments that make it safe and comfortable for pedestrians and bicyclists. And of course, the first thing a child wants to do when they're able to is to start walking. The last thing a senior person wants to give up as we age is the ability to walk. It's a fundamental part of being a human being. I guess bicycling is maybe the next level up. We don't get into that, but walking is definitely fundamental to being a human being and being able to navigate in a community. And unfortunately, we have a lot of parts in our communities that aren't very friendly to walking or bicycling. This is a photo taken by a friend of mine in Missoula, Montana. And what's notable about it is that there's only one person not in a car, standing right there, apparently trying to get across the street. And my friend who took the photo jokes that he went back 3 days later and that person was still standing there. Some of these streets are really hard to cross. And you know, this may not be even the worst. I'm sure there's others out there that are much harder. The other reason this is getting so much attention now is that there's been an increasing concern, especially from public health community, from the medical community, about the really challenging problems we have with sedentary lifestyles. Our work has changed. We're not as active as we used to be. And also our eating habits are not as good. And we're seeing basically an obesity epidemic in this country. And what's, I think, most tragic is the way it's impacting the next generation. So this is adults, you know, numbers for adults. Physical inactivity is, you know, primary factor in a lot of deaths every year. And some of you may have seen these maps showing percentage of a state's population that are classified as obese. So this is back in '87. And you can see back then, California, less than 10% of our adult population was classified as obese. If we now jump ahead 25 years to 2012, those percentage numbers don't even exist. Now we have some states with 30 to 35% of their population that would be classified as obese. California is still in that 25 to 30, although there are parts of the state, like the Central Valley, that are actually on that level. And it's, again, our work has changed, our eating habits have changed, and what's particularly of concern is what's happening to the next generation. Children today are much more overweight than they used to be just 20, 30 years ago. So we've seen back in the early 60s, it was, and these are overweight numbers, by the way, not obese. Overweight children, less than 5%. We're getting close to 20% for some age groups of youth today. And again, that's a serious concern because along with that overweight and obesity come a whole host of medical problems like diabetes, which have serious impacts on our health. Heart disease, cancers, all of those also associated with overweight. So the good news is that we don't actually have to go out there and work up a major sweat to be physically active. 30 minutes a day of walking, of brisk walking, is what the doctors recommend. And you can actually break it up into smaller chunks. You don't have to go to the gym and get on the treadmill, or go to the gym and take the escalator up to get on the treadmill. This is a photo from San Diego. As I said, 30 minutes a day for adults, probably an hour or so for children, 5 days a week. And there's a lot of potential, we think, for making more of our trips by walking or bicycling, particularly in smaller towns and communities where a lot of the destinations may be close by. So these are national numbers, they're not Kern County, but it gives us some sense of how many trips, the length of trips that people take. So 50% of trips that people generally take are less than 3 miles. And you can sort of think about your own travel behavior, how many times you use your car and how long are the trips you're taking. And that could easily be done if you had a bicycle in 15 minutes. And I like to joke with people in California, with the weather we have here generally, and the pretty flat areas around here, it's not that hard to get on a bike. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, 4% of all trips are done by bicycle, including in the winter. They actually clear the snow from their trails. It's one of the first things they do so people can get to work on bikes there. So that, we shouldn't have too many reasons to complain about not riding a bike in California. And then a lot of our trips, almost 30%, are less than 1 mile. And that's really, a 20-minute walk. And yet, in a lot of communities, a lot of those trips are still being done by car. So even the short trips that are easy to do by walking, it's a convenience. Our cars are there. We figure, gas is reasonably cheap. We'll just get in our cars and drive. There's also a lot of potential because every trip, especially for walking, every trip starts with a walk trip. So when you get to the store, or get to the shopping center, you're going to have to walk to one or more stores to get to get to the places you need to. So there's potential there as well. So what we want to talk a little bit about is how we can design these streets that are safer for walking. One of the things we can do is actually think about how we lay out especially our commercial areas, our main streets, the places where we want a lot of people to walk. We really want to get away from putting a lot of parking next to the sidewalk and really create sort of more of a Main Street feel that draws people to those places where people want to spend their dollars and spend some time. So, get away from sort of parking lots lining the sidewalk and getting more to places like this where people want to linger, they want to spend time. There's some stuff in the stores that you want to look at as you walk by. And we know that there are a lot of factors that influence walking. I'm really only going to focus on two of them, connectivity and street design, but there are other issues like having destinations close to where we live with land use mix, and having development densities enough to support destinations and so on, but I won't get into that. On the connectivity, when we don't have good connections, we really deter people from walking. So when people, in these apartments want to get to the shopping center, if they can't get there directly, they're probably not going to go around the long way and do that by walking. They're probably going to jump in a car. In this pattern of development, we get more people walking, more people bicycling as well. And this diagram really sort of shows that. Here are two houses, same distance from the school, but in this one, because there are well-connected streets and there's a park there, that child can get to school fairly easily. It's maybe a 5–10 minute walk. Over here, because we don't have those connections, we now have taken a 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk, and turned it into a 2-mile trip. And then on the way back, we've got a bunch of left turn movements. Every time we have those left turn movements, we have to worry about conflicts. We have to put turning lanes, stop controls, signals, and so on. More potential for crashes when we have those turning movements. We also end up with bigger streets on the edge because more traffic is being funneled onto just a few streets. Still haven't figured out how these folks get in and out of their neighborhood. Slight error there by our graphic designer. But this really does reduce the walking distances when you have this option. It also creates more route choices. So if one of these streets is blocked or there's an emergency, you can get around on other streets because there's a network of streets. Over here, you're really sunk if one of these streets gets cut off. And then you also can disperse the traffic, so you don't have as many cars on individual streets. You can have smaller streets with less traffic on each street, and have, as you can see on the edge, you don't need those big arterial roadways as we see here. The other issue is street design. How do we design streets to feel safe to walk and bike on? So the term that's being used a lot now is complete streets. We want streets that work well, whether you're walking on a bicycle, taking transit in a car, that are friendly to all the users, that balance the needs of all the users. Here's an example of a street that has all of that. It has transit, it has walking, bicycling, cars, etc. Folks on bikes, cars, transit, young, old, able, disabled. Everybody should be able to move on our public rights-of-way, which are our streets. And speed, we know, is a really critical factor, especially in residential or commercial areas. We want to make sure speeds are low enough that, again, they feel safe, that people don't feel they're going to get hit, or just that are hostile to somebody not in the car. So I actually should have fixed this, but basically we're looking at 50 miles per hour. At 50 miles per hour, you see a lot around you. You're going to notice the stores, the storefronts, people walking along the sidewalk. But once we start going faster, our field of vision really narrows down to 20 miles per hour. 25 miles per hour gets even smaller. At 30 miles per hour, this is not the way it is supposed to go, 30 miles per hour, you see how narrow that field of vision is. And you're much less likely to pick up, say, a child stepping onto the street or just some danger up ahead. The other challenge is that the faster you're going, obviously, the longer it takes to stop your car. So at 20 miles per hour, you can stop a car in about 100 feet. Double that to 40 miles per hour, and it takes over 300 feet. And that's just the biology of seeing danger, your brain telling your foot, slam on the brakes, and then the physics of stopping that vehicle. And that's a lot longer distance to stop that car. And then, of course, if a person gets hit by a car at those speeds, at 20 miles per hour, 9 out of 10 pedestrians will survive. At 40 miles per hour, it's the opposite. Only 1 of those 10 pedestrians will survive. And that 1 pedestrian will be seriously injured, probably for life, being hit at that speed. So we really want to think about, in our residential, commercial areas, bringing speeds down, not creating streets that invite high speed. The other thing about, when we're talking about walking and pedestrians, is thinking about how the sidewalks need to work and having space for the furniture that needs to go in the street, and then a clear path for people who are walking or wheelchairs, and then the area next to the buildings. So we really want sidewalks, in order, again, to be comfortable for pedestrians, we want them to have a buffer to the street. So in residential neighborhoods, often we have, the planter strip, or we have some vegetation out there. In commercial areas, we often have parked cars or the street furniture. In this case, just having the bike lane there moves the cars away from the sidewalk. So the bike lanes have a lot of benefits beyond for the bicyclists. In this case, they have a benefit for those pedestrians. Narrow sidewalks are great for young couples in love, but for average-sized folks, we need a little bit more space out there. And 5 feet is what's needed for 2 people to walk, 2 adults to walk side by side. The big challenge with pedestrians and vehicles, of course, is at the points of conflict, and most of those are when we're crossing the street. So what can we do to make those crossings safer? One is to have high visibility crosswalk markings. And here's an example of one. You really see that, it pops out, it's very visible to the motorist as well as a pedestrian. Pedestrian obviously standing there sees it easily. The other thing we can do with, to support pedestrians and make it easier is that in commercial areas, when we have on-street parking, as we do here and on this side with diagonal, the corners really can't be used to park. So we take that space and we give it back to the pedestrian in the form of a curb extension or a bump out or a bulb out. So you notice that went from 58 feet to cross to only 32 feet. Now, if this were a signalized crossing, this would also benefit the motorist because now you wouldn't have to hold traffic back as long to let the pedestrians cross. So it's a real win-win to do this at intersections. It also improves visibility. The motorist and the bicyclist can see the pedestrian can see the motorist. The pedestrian doesn't have to step out into traffic there to see past, say, an SUV or a truck. And it also slows down cars a bit. So here's an example of one where we see some nice vegetation in the intersection, gives us some space for some street furniture. We have to keep it, make sure we don't block visibility with that. And it also slows cars entering and exiting that street.
Oh, where is that?
That's actually in Florida. It's Venice, Florida. I believe. And then this is a mid-block situation where, again, the pedestrian gets out past, if they were standing back on the sidewalk, they'd have to step into the street to see when it's safe to cross. Medians, we also know, really help pedestrians get across the street. They simplify the crossing. You only have to worry about direction in one direction to travel. For cars coming in one direction at a time. So a pedestrian looks to the left, crosses the median, looks to the right, crosses the second leg. 40% reduction in pedestrian crashes when we have a median. And you can even do these little small medians or little refuge islands. This one in Sacramento, near where I live, in Midtown, which slow the cars down as they're coming through. They see this thing in the middle of the street. And the pedestrian, can pause there if the cars don't yield to them. What I find is that because the motorists are already slowing down a bit, the yield rate to pedestrians is actually very high. And here's an example. This is one in front of a school in Olympia, Washington. And then if we're going to mark a crosswalk, we also want to make sure we light it. 50% of pedestrian crashes occur at night. And then finally, bicycling. One of the things we're finding that's really helping us to actually add infrastructure for bicycles is that a lot of the lanes we have out there are freeway size. We've built a lot of streets with 12-foot lanes, which are what we typically build for freeways when we're going 60, 70 miles per hour. In urban areas where the speeds are below 35, 45 miles per hour, we can actually build our lanes a little bit narrower, 10 or 11 foot wide. And that gives us the opportunity to do something like this. This is just a photo simulation, but basically they narrowed down the lanes on a one-way street and added a bike lane on one side. And some of the other tools that we're starting to see used for bicycling are separated or protected bikeways, where we actually put the bicyclist next to the sidewalk and put either parked cars or a curb that protects the bicyclist from the moving cars. These are now being called in California Class 4 bikeways. And then they're also called cycle tracks or protected buffered or separated bike lanes. We also have buffered bike lanes. More and more cities are doing that, where they have space, extra space on the street, and you can buffer the cars, the bicyclists from the moving cars, or you can also put the buffer on the parking side, so you don't have doors being opened into the bikes. Here's some examples of recent cycle tracks. These two are in Long Beach. Notice that they provide enough space, there's a curb there, but then the motorist who's getting out of their car is not stepping into the bikeway there. They still have space there either way. This is in the smaller city of Ripon in Central Valley. This is in Temple City down in Southern California. Other examples, this is a buffered bike lane, this is in Austin, Texas. These are in, this is Fairfax, and I forget where, I think that's California, I'm not sure where. But again, if we have extra space, give the bicyclist a little bit more protection from the moving cars. The other technique that we're using now is green, basically using the green colored paint to highlight points of conflict between bicyclists and cars. So here, for example, as you're approaching the intersection, they have the green paint. Here's an example of where you would use it when you have a right turn lane and you want to get the bicycle lane that's continuing through over, so you highlight that conflict. And then a bicycle box is what we're seeing here, where you give a head start to the bicyclist. So that's just a very quick overview. Back in '69, we got a man to walk on the moon. The hope is that by 2020, we'll get more people walking on our main streets. So at this point, we just want to give you that quick overview, some ideas for what other communities are doing, and really the rest of the day, we can get the lights back on. Will be a chance for you to look at these boards carefully if you haven't had a chance to do that. We do have some spots where we want you to write or use dots to highlight things you think would be. I'll come over to this one. So this board here, for example, is what we like to see in your community, and has some different options. And I think you're allowed 3 votes. So you take 3 dots and pick them, and no double dotting. You have to find 3 different things. And then on that map over there, we really like to capture where in Rosamond people actually walk or bike, or would like to walk or bike more, and capture that on that map. And I think we've already had maybe a few people indicate locations. This map here is showing bicycle and pedestrian collisions in the community, so you can sort of see where the problem areas are. There have been, this is the last 5 years, well, actually not the last 5, it's 2009 through 13, am I correct? Yeah. So it's showing where pedestrian and bicycle collisions took place. And your percentages are actually fairly high on those, so it's worth noting that, and maybe, those are places that need some additional attention. Anything else, Rory or your team would like to highlight? And we have staff here from Alta, as well as my colleague Josh Meyer, who can also, if you want to just sit and talk or give us some comments, we'd be happy to take all that in. We're at the stage, we're just at the early stages of this planning process, where we're really asking for input from the community. You're the experts, you live and work here, you know what works, what doesn't. So tell us what we should know, and based on that, Alta will prepare a draft plan. And I'm not sure, Roy, if you want to go over the timeline for the planning process.
I forgot to mention the schedule. So we started this effort in the late summer, early fall. And after tonight's or this week's workshop and all the other events that are happening this week, we're going to go back and digest all this information, and we'll be coming back in the spring, probably in April, with a set of draft recommendations for you to take a look at. Let us know if we're on the right track, or if we missed the mark, or if we missed anything. And after that, we'll go back and digest that information, and we'll be finalizing the plan around the end of June. So it's about a year-long effort from start to finish. And the ultimate goal is that Kern COG, Kern County, and the local communities have an adopted active transportation plan that they can each go out and use to apply for grant funding to actually put these projects into action. So that's the bigger picture goal of this effort. Any questions or thoughts?
I just have a couple of observations I want to make sure you guys agree. 8 o'clock in the morning and highly used in the afternoon from about 4 to 5:30 or 6. One is schools, 2 schools are on Rosamond Boulevard, and the other one is Tropico out a little bit further, so there's less traffic. But there's still a lot of traffic going on at the time those schools are let out or they're going to school. And the other one is West Park. So that corridor is just a mess in the morning and in the afternoon. So, and I know, I've lived here for 50 years. I remember walking to school and not having nearly the scary stuff happening on the Road Boulevard that happens now.
Right.
So I would certainly want you guys to be aware of those traffic issues.
And looking at the map, I mean, I'm new to this community, I've never been here before, but just looking at the map, I can see it's the only east-west
Yes, right.
street you have in the whole town. So,
Okay, so this morning there was an accident, not too far from the high school, so it shut down to one lane. So it was backed up. On top of that, there's some kids you can see walking to the high school, and I've seen a person get run over because people are going way too fast.
Yeah.
Was trapped underneath the person's car.
oh,
And then on 35th Street today, I saw a bunch of kids walking. I'm thinking, they're walking at their own peril. It's not enough space. There's no sidewalks on either side of those streets. They're walking in the dirt.
which street was that, 35th?
35th.
35th?
They're coming up to the high school.
So going
That's
toward the
pretty
high school.
dangerous.
Okay.
So,
Good to know, yeah. And I think, you know, I talked a little bit about connectivity. I mean, that's the importance of connectivity also for dispersing traffic, so you don't have it all on one street. When you only have one east-west corridor,
yeah.
that makes it really
Well, that
challenging.
base traffic comes up early off the freeway here, headed out that way, and then on the way back,
Right.
it's getting on 14. So those are crunch times here.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And you said from 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning
Almost to 8.
to 8, okay, 6:30 to 8, and then in the afternoon, what are the peak?
Well, definitely 4:35, 5:30. You can't even hardly get across. If you're going out towards the base, you can't even turn into any of the parking lots on the other side. It's just continuous.
Continuous traffic, okay.
Sir, another thing that I could say, and she's absolutely right about the traffic. Someone from the base, it'd be nice to have some of their people here, because the people in Rosamond, we know the challenges already. We know if you're coming out after 5 o'clock, just wait.
Right.
But those folks are coming, they live in Lancaster, Palmdale, Santa Clarita. That's a runway for them to get to the base, so our kids have to navigate. So I think having some of the local people here is important, but you know, have one of their representatives, because we can only do so much. We can tell you all the things that impact us, what she has.
Yeah.
But if they don't adhere to it, we spoke, you know, we tell the sheriffs of the CHP,
Yeah.
and they'll monitor them for about a week. Guess what? In a week's time, they slow down. The following week, they speed back up. So
Right.
perhaps, as we push forward,
Yeah.
maybe get someone of their reps out here, you know, to talk with them, because
Yeah.
the Rosamond people will learn real quick, because
Right.
we get the benefit.
Yeah.
But that person that's, you know, sliding off the freeway, we've talked already about working on that off ramp there, but we found out that that's Caltrans, and Caltrans has it done for a certain way. So we've already ran into that roadblock a little bit. So I think long term, if we could have someone from the base out there and talk with those folks.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think you make a good point. I mean, these active transportation programs focus on infrastructure, but they also do have money to run, you know, to do programs, and part of that could be programs that highlight, you know, that basically get the safety and enforcement piece to work along with the infrastructure changes. I mean, we like to, you know, we often focus on the infrastructure because that's sort of the stuff you build and so on, but there are other things that can be recommended in an active transportation program that focus on education, encouragement, and enforcement, which are equally, you know, important and vital. And when you have an institution like a base, where, you know, people work and you know, are coming and going from there, you might have some ability to get that message across through the folks there. So I think that's a good point.
So is your plan to actually run the sidewalk out past down Rosamond Boulevard out to?
I don't know that we have anything. I think that's what we want to hear from all of you here today. Is where should, you know, if you were to build sidewalks, where would you build them? And that's where that aerial photo.
Well, I gave Rory over there, Mike.
Okay.
There's a lot of traffic that's sort of off Sierra Highway.
Yeah.
Senior Citizen Complex on down to Hillcrest. There's a lot of people that actually physically walk that area. There's not as much traffic. You see us out there in the morning, and you see us out there in the evening.
Okay. Well, what I would suggest is when we're done with the questions and comments, we'll just maybe even put that board on a table
Right, we
with
did mark
some, with
that.
some markers and just mark it up some more. Just, you know, because that, you know, as I said, you're the experts. You tell us where the stuff is needed. There's some communities that I've been to a number of times, but this is the first time I'm here, so I don't, you know, I won't know that. Pete won't know that. So we really depend on all of you to help us figure that out.
Well, I heard you guys want to do down 20th Street, which there's a lot of housing down that area too with no sidewalks.
20th Street, okay. What's that?
We're on.
We're on 20th, right. Okay.
Make sure, yeah, any ideas or thoughts you have to get written down some way, whether it's one of us or you.
So basically, I think people have identified what we all
What I
know.
heard as they were talking to, like. it
Oh,
seems
you
like
were
this-
writing them as they were doing it?
I was noting it in my head while someone else was writing on the board over there.
Oh, okay.
I can see that these are the same streets that people were talking about. Rosamond.
Yeah, all around the schools and the
around all the
parks
schools.
are always
Yeah,
the biggest
yeah.
challenge, you know. That's the
Yeah.
biggest challenge. But it seems like you have them pretty well marked,
Good.
particularly between the high school and going across the freeway.
Oh, really? This way?
Uh-huh. Because
Yeah, it
the
gets
high
really
school gets out and they walk east across the freeway down into, you know, what we call downtown Rosamond.
Right, right.
And that gets heavy traffic all the time.
That's good to know.
Yeah. They go to the park, they go to their home, they go to Diamond Street or someplace, you know, like that. What does that really mean? What does the active transportation plan mean?
Well, it's a long-range vision for Kern County and its communities in terms of where they'd like to see themselves in the next couple of decades in terms of their walking and bicycling transportation network. So that represents both what the infrastructure you see on the ground, but also the supporting programs like education, encouragement, enforcement that make walking and bicycling integral parts of daily life. And what you see on this map is a collection of what's on the ground today in terms of the bicycle network and what has been proposed in recent planning efforts. So for instance, I think it was in 2012 or somewhere around there, Kern County did a county-wide bicycle master plan that covered more like the intercity connections. Bakersfield, the city of Bakersfield completed the plan a couple of years ago as well. So this effort is intended to build upon those recent plans, perhaps add a little more detail, and add a corresponding pedestrian component.
Sure. Well, that's good. So naturally, the most people are in Bakersfield,
Yeah.
and only a few people out here in Rosamond, Cal City, and Mojave. But nonetheless, the needs are pretty much the same.
Yep, the needs are there, and so we've been going around over the last couple of weeks to each of these communities in various different formats to try to ground truth some of the data that we're seeing here on the maps.
Sure, good. And collecting it all, and then there's a point of, when it goes to get the money, there's a point, something to show.
Yeah, that's right. And so our next step is after we finish up these events, we're going to go back, do a little bit of homework, and digest all the information that we collected here and the feedback, and come up with some draft recommendations and ideas. We're going to come back out to the communities in probably April or May and check in to get a sense of are we heading in the right direction. And if we are, we'll keep going and formulate that into a formal active transportation plan with a list of projects, prioritized projects for each of the communities, and then that would ultimately be adopted by the Council of Governments this summer.
Sure. Well, I was trying to impress the young lady about Rosamond's geographic area. It's a desert community, it's unincorporated, with a huge school district. And we bring kids in from 300th Street. And when people look at Rosamond, like that map over there, cuts it off at Tropical or Will Springs Road, which is,
Couple of maps down here.
yeah,
Focus on this project in here, that might serve a lot of people.
sure. And logically, it would be right there, right along Rosamond Boulevard
It might
between,
be, and we might get a bigger bang for our buck here than we, in here, as
Yeah.
opposed to here.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there's no need out here. It just
True.
might say we have limited,
Yeah.
limited funding.
Sure.
Where do we start? So,
Sure.
And we have a similar map that's showing collisions involved.
Yeah, I saw that over there, yeah.
So that's another thing that would be considered. And it kind of the sweet spot, for lack of a better term, is if we had a bunch of collisions here, that would tell us, wow, this is a place we really
Better solve the
we
problem.
can really get a lot of
Yeah,
return on our investment if we focused in somewhere.
true,
So at least we started.
yeah. Well, it's good to go through it and
It's hard.
itemize it and show it. And then when the people that have to release the funds, they feel comfortable in how they're spending the money.
Yeah, it's if any other thing, it's a plan of action. We'll have a vision, but then this is the plan of action. How are we going to get to that vision?
Yeah. Yeah, true enough. Good.